Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Joe Tossi from TechTables.com, and you're listening to the Public Sector Show by TechTables. This podcast features human-centric stories from public sector CIOs, CISOs, and technology leaders across federal, state, city, county, and higher education. You'll gain valuable insights into current issues and challenges faced by top leaders. Through interviews, speaking engagements, live podcast tour events, we offer you a behind-the-mic look at the opportunities top leaders are seeing today. And to make sure you never miss an episode, head over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and hit that follow button and leave a quick rating. Just tap the number of stars that you think this show deserves. Today, we're thrilled to have J.R. Sloan, Chief Information Officer for the state of Arizona, Ryan Murray, Deputy Director of Homeland Security and Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Arizona, and Doug Lange, Vice President of IT Strategy at Choice Hotels. All returning guests to the pod.
That's right.
Love it. Welcome to the Public Sector Show by Tech.
Great to be here.
JR, for those who don't know you, because we do have a national podcast, just give us a quick intro.
I'm J.R. Sloan. I am the CIO for the state of Arizona. I've been in that role about 4 years.
Ryan?
Deputy Director for the Arizona Department of Homeland Security, Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Arizona. Been in the role for about 2 years now, mostly in public sector for the majority of my career, born and raised here in Arizona. Glad to be on the show.
Doug?
Doug Lange, VP IT Strategy, Choice Hotels. I have been with Choice for about 2.5 years. Prior, I met both of these gentlemen at the state, former Chief Strategy Officer for the state of Arizona.
Love that. You highlighted the importance of enterprise level thinking, creating strategic models and frameworks to drive innovation at scale in your new role at Choice. You were at Choice, I think you had just started 2 years ago too. But share a little bit about Choice's specific approach to innovation and how you're leveraging these enterprise strategies to shape Choice's technology investment priorities.
I would say whether it's at the state, whether it's at Choice, when you're talking about enterprise level thinking in frameworks in scale, it's still going to come back to how do you drive simplicity into something that's really complex, right? And I think something that we all talk about quite a bit, it's going to revolve around people, process, and technology no matter what you do. So you have that at the nucleus, but it's really about, okay, how do you create a model where you can harness that energy and really create something that's repeatable and continues to evolve. So when you talk about innovation at Choice, what I try to do is really say, okay, we're going to take the emotion out of it. We're going to take the buzz out of it. There are a ton of technologies out there. How do you figure what ones are going to be right for us and when? So we really look at it in 3 categories. You have Act Now. So that's things we're actively implementing, actively leveraging. You have things that we're investigating. So that's things that are showing up in the hospitality space, showing up in the tech space. Tangible use cases are there. Not everyone's using them. You're starting to see value come, and we're trying to figure out, okay, is this value we want to bring to Choice? And then you have Monitor. And when we talk about Monitor, those are the really buzzy things that they don't have a place in our environment now. They probably don't have a place in our environment in the next year or two, but we need to keep an eye on them to make sure when the time is right, we can pounce. And I think if you take that approach and you wrap a team around constantly reviewing it in that way, you're taking an ecosystem of thousands of types of technologies and saying, how do we prioritize what's best for our organization and where are we going to get the most value?
I love that. JR, you talked about the challenges of collaborating across 130 agencies in Arizona's Federated model. I'd love to hear you expand on that for our audience. How do you ensure the alignment between your IT strategy and the needs and priorities of all the agencies?
I think it starts with really seeking to understand what are their needs and what are their priorities. We've started back when Doug was at the state, putting together an approach that really sought to take, we had an annual strategic plan submission process. The fact is, I don't know, we got maybe 30 or 40 on a good day with a tailwind out of, we should be getting 100 plus. And we looked at the process and how that was working and maybe some things that weren't working so well in that, and worked from the customer backwards and say, look, how do we make sure there's value for you in this, that we can provide some structured feedback? So we now have a process where we're producing a report that goes back to the agencies where they can see, they can look at their answers and see, here's my answers relative to everybody else's answers. We can see what the key trends are. We can see what the things are emerging. And there's actually value for them in participating in the process. And I think that's an indicator of how we have to get things done at the state, is really to look and say, look, there's not a mandate that says you have to do what I tell you to do, but I want you to do the right thing. And so how do we help find what the right thing is? And a lot of it is coming back to saying, the mission of your organization better than I'll know the mission of your organization. But I'm looking across all the organizations to say, where are some things that we can do at an enterprise level, enterprise scale, and that we're all going to do better if we do it together than if we just keep trying to single shot things on the sides. That's the thinking process.
Ryan, in our previous conversation, you mentioned the importance of understanding the challenges and concerns from the local government, at the state level, counties, you name it. You've done the roadshow, literally done the roadshow. How do you align the state of Arizona's cybersecurity strategy with all the broad needs and priorities while also ensuring that the local government isn't left behind?
Yeah, and I'll say not only do we support the same 130 plus agencies that JR's organization does from a cybersecurity perspective, we're also now supporting 300 plus local government entities through our cyber readiness program. Obviously, the scope and breadth of the entire state has a lot of challenges when trying to figure out how do we support them best. And one thing, you mentioned the roadshows, right? Going out there and actually talking to people, understanding their challenges directly. No one wants me to sit in my ivory tower in Phoenix and shout out orders to them and figure out, hey, you're going to go do this. And I don't have the authority to do that anyway, to JR's point. So being able to go out and understand where their pain points are and provide real concrete solutions to those challenges, everything comes together in a nice, cohesive, poetic way. And I'll say we're looking at standard frameworks. We're looking at what the federal government is recommending. We're talking to our insurance providers to say, look, this is what we're requiring of our insured members. We want to make sure that you as the state are able to help them get to that point, whether that's a city, a county, a school district, a tribal community. We want to make sure that whatever those requirements are, those challenges are, we're helping them to overcome them.
Doug, how do you ensure that your IT strategy aligns with the overall business objectives with choice? And what are some of the key considerations and challenges when it comes to driving technology initiatives at large, especially for a publicly traded company?
Are you familiar with the concept of spheres of influence?
Yes.
You
Sorry,
have-
I didn't know if you were just gonna. Sorry.
Is that rhetorical?
Absolutely. So you get into a mode where it's what do you control? What do you influence? And then ultimately, what are you concerned with that you don't control or influence? And I think when you look at strategy, whether it's public sector, it's private sector, it's okay, from an IT department, what do you control? When you're talking about strategy, you absolutely control the guiding principles that you're running at. And whether that's the technologies that you want to invest in, the development practices that you're going to roll out, that's something that you own. You own your velocity, you own your quality, you own the infrastructure, the cloud investments that you're going to make, right? So those are things within a strategy that you can really control and drive. You get into influence. Tech is really there as a business enabler, right? So the business is the lead dance partner. And I look at it really in two different ways. So from a business unit perspective, it's how do we get as close to them as possible? And not in the rears, but truly upfront when they're ideating, they're grappling with challenges. So you can really be a partner all the way through. Then from an enterprise IT shop, there's one other scale of influence that you can really drive at, and it's where's the think tank? So think finance, right? Who's approving all the tech spend. Think corporate strategy, who has the North Star in terms of where the organization is going to go. You aligning with those entities provides a whole different level of influence that then you can wield and drive across the company. Well, you get into concern, right? I would say this is something the state does really well. This is a habit that we are really building into what we do at Choice. Understanding what's happening in the marketplace, understanding where the companies in the tech space are going, understanding where your competitors are going. And I think if you're constantly having an eye towards that, do you control it? No. Can you absolutely plug that back into your strategy and where you're headed? Yes.
You know, Ryan shared about going out and talking with people on the cyber readiness program. Doug's talking about going out and meeting with and talking with the business unit. I was talking about the IT strategy plan and showing value back, but understanding what is really important to people. And the thread through all of that is that we get things done through trust. We have to build trust with the people that above us, below us, beside us, and that's how anything gets done.
Ryan, on our previous episode, we touched on collaboration, but if you just want to speak a little bit to that on this episode.
So obviously, again, nothing gets done without the relationships that we built. All of this is a team sport. It's something we have to continue working together on. And we've seen this time and time again where organizations that have tried to go at their own, that have tried to silo themselves, they come to ruin, right? We want to make sure that we are protecting everyone across the entirety of the state of Arizona and truly defending the homeland, right? Cybersecurity is homeland security. And we take that message to heart. So I want to make sure that we understand, as we're talking to all of those members of the Homeland, whether that's citizens, whether that's our stakeholders, that we're all coming together to support that common mission and vision. And that's not just to do the cybers, right? Chris Inglis, former National Cyber Director, had an amazing conversation around this where he said, don't do cyber for cyber's sake. We are all here to support a broader strategic mission, whether that's at the federal level, corporation level, or national level, or our state level, or our city level. We all have a mission that we're trying to drive to provide services to wherever our customers and stakeholders are. And that mission, by and large, unless you are a cybersecurity company, is not cybersecurity. So we're here to support, we're here to provide risk management and risk mitigation strategies. We're here to help executive leadership to understand what that cyber risk is to their organization, just as their CFO is providing financial risk, just as their legal team is providing legal risk advice. We're here to provide cyber risk advice and cyber mitigations. And the only way any of that works is if all of us are having that same conversation about what is important to us, how are we protecting it, and how are we moving forward to drive that strategy.
I love that. Let's jump to our favorite subject, emerging technologies and, can anyone finish it? AI.
Take a drink.
Take a drink.
Okay, JR, looking ahead, what emerging technologies or trends are you most excited about that actually have a good use case and impact for state government?
So AI is definitely in there. I think what we've seen with generative AI coming forward, the types of automation that's going to bring, the value that we'll see in being customer-centric, bringing things that we've seen delivered, I think, in the private sector for years, but I think this is going to drive it more into the public sector. Going back to when Morgan was CIO, at that point, we talked about the fact that people wanted the type of experience that, that they would get online shopping, right? They want that same type of engagement with their government where it just works. And I don't have to go and hunt across 130 some websites to hope that I can find the link that gets me through to the service that I'm looking for. I should be able to just find it organically.
Was that his tell to go to Amazon, by the way? No.
I've probably factored in. So generative AI is going to definitely be part of it. We're still seeing the benefits of going back to AI has been around for 20 years now, but we're still seeing the benefits coming through and what it can do in robotic process automation. It's all really about elevating the value of the individual, automating the task, taking work off of them that is, I'll say, better handled by machines, and leaving the work to people that only people can do and that people will be the best at.
I love that. Ryan, AI, Gen AI, and ML are increasingly being leveraged in cybersecurity. We touched on this a little bit on the last episode, but in case no one will listen to that last episode, touch upon it on this episode. How is Arizona approaching the adoption of these technologies within cybersecurity?
Yeah, and I'll say probably the expectation is the cyber guy is going to come out and say AI is terrifying and the sky is falling and we should all be clutching our pearls and trying to figure out how to get past this. But realistically, I think it's another innovative technology that we could potentially use not only to help serve our citizens better, to better drive decisions around the data that we have, but also from a cybersecurity perspective, right? We have copious amounts of data when it comes to cyber logs that we're collecting, incidents that we're responding to, even just pushing patches to vulnerabilities that we're trying to address across our corporate fleet. Being able to look at that data and make meaningful choices around it, something that would take an analyst of mine hours or days or months to comb through and try to find anomalous or even baseline or malicious activity, we can now do in potentially minutes or seconds. So enhancing ourselves, using us as like bolting on cybernetics to us as an enhancer, as a force multiplier for the things we're already doing, I think that's where we're going to see the greatest benefit here. Obviously, there is some potential risk, and we're seeing the threat actors use the same tools that we're also utilizing within our own environments. So understanding that our enemies are going to continue to get stronger, better, faster, utilizing these tools, we need to be better, stronger, faster defenders as well.
I love that. Doug, with the rapid advancement of AI, how is Choice Hotels approaching these type of trends, these emerging trends? Share a few insights from the AI task force that you established and the methodology you're using to evaluate and prioritize investments in this area.
Yeah, so I'm going to say 2 years ago-ish, ChatGPT all of a sudden burst on the scene, right? And it was buzzy and it was in the media and everyone was trying to figure out what it was. My head of architecture and myself were diving into all things Gen AI. At that point in time, there were like 11 companies we were looking at. 11 turned into 200. 200 then turned into now around 800. Well, you go one click up and you get out of Gen AI and you just talk AI in general. So all the things JR talked about, talking about 67,000 active companies.
Growing every day, right?
And growing every
Yeah.
single day, right? That's not something that any one of us can really wrangle in and say, yes, these are the top 3 that we know are tried and true. From Choice's perspective, what we did is we said, okay, number one, we're going to launch a task force so we have actual focus when it comes to Gen AI. One of the first things is that task force is absolutely going to be cross-functional from all corners of the company. But we're applying that same framework that I was talking about in terms of an approach to how we attack Gen AI. So we're really looking at it in terms of 3 buckets. What are active POCs that we're implementing, engaging, measuring, and trying to see, okay, how do we crawl, walk, run before we deploy something across our enterprise? Then you have R&D. So that's where idea funnel sits. And when I'm talking about idea funnel, think technology that aligns with our tech strategy, a use case that's relevant to Choice and its customer base. And then the third would be an actual ROI. Right? Because a lot of these technologies are fun to use and they put a smile on your face, but you still have to make the investment, right? And that investment needs to be worth it. And we have a steering committee that's going to be going through all of these ideas, trying to figure out what are the top priorities for Choice, what ones are actually going to be ushered into the POCs. And then you get into everyone's favorite topic, which would be governance and compliance. Right. Gen AI is not going anywhere. Our goal is how do we really define our security posture, our legal posture, all the artifacts that we need to get in place. So as we launch off through the next couple of years, we're doing so on a solid foundation.
That's great. Something you had said, just there's just like an explosion of vendors who are offering these solutions. Just any thoughts on like how do you manage that evaluating? I think there's like 3,000. It's just insane. Like every day there's a new piece of tech or product. Like as a CIO or a decision maker, how do you handle that?
I think you end up having to narrow down the funnel through just, I'll say, the processes that we have, which is it's going to be going to the market. It's going to be doing our best job to express, and I try to encourage folks like, what is the business outcome we're trying to achieve? Don't tell me what the thing currently does, but what is it we want to get out of this, and what is the value of that to the business? If we can express that, the vendor partner community, they'll come forward with solutions. And we're not going to fit 67,000 of them into a single engagement, but the best will rise to the top, and they do.
And you just hit on a good point I want to add on. There is just as much negative in that momentum and that energy as there is positive, in the sense that it can be a really big distraction. So I think you need to figure out as an organization, what is your process and how does your idea funnel come in where you can still focus on your customers executing in the text that you're investing in? Because very quickly, I think every single tech platform snapped in an AI component. I would joke with my head of architecture, pretty soon, the recycling company is going to show up and say they also do AI. And that's fine, but any good strategy still has to hit on execution. And in order to execute, you have to focus.
Doug, reflecting on your career journey, what advice would you give to IT leaders considering a move between public and private sectors? You've done this full loop. Private sector, public sector, now you're back. Love to hear any lessons or insights or any valuable takeaways you've had.
No matter whether you're switching sectors or you're switching organizations, I think it needs to start with just understanding your environment first, right? Ask a lot of questions, listen, learn, understanding your surroundings. But past that, from what I can see, when you're talking about transitioning from public sector to private sector, right? And where is that measure of success? I think just don't hesitate, right? You know who you are, you know your craft, you know what you're good at. When you're talking about working in an internal organization, I think we've talked about this in the past, there's a level of urgency, and it's different because there's revenues that are tied to ultimately product lines and successes. And with that, there's an engagement that's expected. So I would say, people understand the how. That's how they got into the roles they're in. They just need to lean in and engage and build those relationships and drive towards the outcomes.
Love that. JR, throughout your time as CIO, you've emphasized the importance of shifting from a utility mindset to a more customer-centric, service-oriented approach. As you reflect on your experience leading IT in Arizona, what have been some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned on driving innovation, building trust, and delivering value for the state?
I think it's be in for the long game. You're not going to build trust overnight with people. You've got to follow through on your commitments. You can say, I want you to trust me, and I have reasons why you should trust me. But frankly, until the rubber hits the road and either it's a bad day for them and you said I would be there, you got to be there. And or following through with, I'll say something when it's going to cost you because it's the right thing to do. So I'll say that in nothing wildly different than I'll say the private sector, right? Because at the end of the day, we are dealing with people regardless of whether it's public sector or private sector. There's different drivers in the environments where in the private sector, it's going to be more profit and quarterly reporting, and innovation is going to be probably a stronger driver there. In the public sector, it's, wow, we're risk averse and we're all worried about the front page. And so we tend to move more slowly and cautiously. But there's annual budget cycles and it's use your money. And if you don't use your money, it might not be there next time. And we'll say weird things about how funding and budgeting and all those things work in government, which crafts behavior. So we engage with the people is really the most vital thing. And moving from you have to work with me because I'm the only option, that's not a great place to be. And that's not the kind of organization that I want to lead. And that's not how I want people to interface with me. Is, okay, I'll meet with you because I have to. I'd rather have people engage with my organization and take the services that we have because they're valuable and they want to work with us. And I'll say, I want to move from a model where we're pushing things out to where they're pulling us, right? Because they see the value in it.
Yeah, I love that. And bringing community together is why we have the Tech Tables event. So absolutely. So just as a quick follow-up, how do you anticipate the role of the CIO evolving in the coming years? It's changing really quickly, but I'd love to see in the next, it could be 2 to 5 years, how you think that role is going to change.
I think we're seeing lots of new things pop up around the CIO, right? We've got chief data officers coming along line. We've had CISOs for several years now. We've got, you have chief innovation officers popping up. There's a technology, and a lot of these have a technology component. So I think the role of the CIO is going to continue to be, I'll say, you got to be a good broker of your services. You really have to be a good engager in terms of understanding the business and the people that you're working with. At the end of the day, it is going to continue to be about relationships, but you have to adapt your strategies and be able to be willing to give up pieces that you might have felt you were responsible for to someone else who's going to bring more focus to it and really be able to help. Frankly, if you work with them, you'll drive farther, faster. If you're going to fight it, it's probably just not going to work as well.
I love that. Ryan, curious, how do you see the role of CISO evolving?
Yeah, obviously the role of CISO has evolved in the state of Arizona, perhaps differently than most other states or even most corporations run, right? JR and I are essentially peers. We're both driving the same mission, which is the secure delivery of citizen services. And we saw presciently within the state of Arizona that maybe these should be two separate roles with different reporting structures. And I'll say part of that is going to be driven significantly by our push to protect not only state services, state information services, but also critical infrastructure. We're partnering very closely with our National Guard, other military organizations. We're partnering with our Department of Public Safety and law enforcement organizations. We've got an intelligence sharing group, so we're collecting, collating, and curating intelligence around cyber attacks, understanding who our threat actors are, either nationally or internally. And that's something that traditionally does not fall within an IT organization, right? Building those relationships, further defending critical infrastructure from a true strategic defense perspective, defending the homeland, right, is something I think we're going to see continue to grow over time. We're starting to see whether it's the CISO role themselves taking on these tasks or compartmentalized or partner chief organizations that are taking on some of those roles, whether that's chief security officer, chief security advisor. We've seen chief cyber officers in certain other states. So I think we're going to start to see this continuous evolution of what a chief information security officer does, not just from a cybersecurity protection perspective, but understanding true risk to our organizations from everything and every aspect.
That's great. Doug, curious around where on the strategy side, how do you see not only your role evolving, but being the former chief strategy officer for the state of Arizona, how do you see that strategy piece evolving in the next couple of years?
In my role or on the public sector side?
Both, all the above.
I think from my perspective, I think in JR hit on this, once basically tech became not only something that you're doing in-house, but something you're really leveraging the community and partnering out, tech leadership changed fundamentally, right? You're no longer getting a feather in your cap when you're talking about empire building and building as much in-house with as many resources as you can. You have to take a business-minded approach. You have to understand your customers, whether it's internal or external. And I think as long as cloud-based technologies and partnerships play such a big role in your scale, roles like chief strategy officer, innovation officer, digital officer, in addition to the ones you rattled off, are just going to become more and more prevalent, because you talk about digital was basically one vertical in a tech strategy. Every emerging technology that you're talking about at some level touches on data, and then in a lot of cases, digital, right? So it's taking the funnel up a level and basically saying you're coming through these to touch everything else that you do. I think roles like we're talking about are here to stay. I think they're just going to continue to evolve.
Yeah, no, I love what you said. You're getting above the business and being able to think strategically about what the outcomes need to be to actually execute and get done. That was great. As we wrap up, love to hear from each of you. Favorite book on organizational strategy, building high performance teams, or leadership that you would recommend to our listeners, and why? JR, you want to take it first?
Okay. All right. So I became a fan of, I'll say, almost any book by Patrick Lencioni.
Yeah.
One of the ones that I really drew upon and still use elements from it in whenever I'm doing a recruiting or interviewing process is The Ideal Team Player. So that's one that's always on my list of things to go look at.
It's a great one. I had the chance to hear him speak live, and it was great.
It's cliche, but I'm going to go back to Good to Great. I think there's so much in that book that is applicable in not only that, but when you talk about talent, you talk about building high performing teams. You very quickly can become a victim of your own success where, let's say you attract a really talented individual, they know they're executing at a level that's high. You still need to keep going, right? And what I talk a lot about with my leadership and in my teams is we could be a 2 out of 10, we can be a 9 out of 10. We're still going to try to get a little bit better. And I think there's just so many things that book touches on how you just continue to try to rise and just improve.
Yeah. Is there a specific takeaway? Like, I'm thinking in my head personally right now, like obsessiveness is like a great trait. If you're driving, you like wanting to be better and better, but I'd love to hear if there was a trait that stood out.
I don't know if there's one trait. I was actually just covering this topic not too long ago with someone that I'm mentoring, basically just becoming obsessive with not success as a principle, but about outcomes and driving towards continuous growth mindset.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there are so many principles in that book that come back to the idea that you could be Michael Jordan, but it doesn't mean that there aren't still ways that you're going to try to evolve who you are and what it is that you're doing to get better and better. And I think when you look at organizations, especially in the tech space, the ones that stay around are the ones that continue to evolve. Right? The ones that actually just, maybe they were an industry leader and they just got stuck drinking their own Kool-Aid, they get passed by, right? I think that continuous growth mindset is huge.
Yeah, no, I agree. I know in the public sector, we talk a lot about innovation, but and innovation is actually very scary. When you try and do something new, what you don't hear is like people talking about you, or you don't hear about like the risks that it took. And so, like when I started the podcast, this is my great example. I started on episode 1 and I had plenty of people tell me this won't go anywhere. And then episode 20 was the same thing. It's like having that conviction, or even the live event. I was like, I have a vision for a live event. And I was like, I think I talked to myself at a coffee shop in Handlebar in Santa Barbara. And some guy next to me goes, that's a dumb idea. And I'm like, who is this guy? So I mean, you got to have that conviction of, hey, you know what? I think there's an opportunity. I'm going to stick to my guns and I'm going to drive this forward. And so there's a lot of books around that, but I love the sports analogy.
It was episode 24 was the killer.
That's the one that really set you off. Yeah.
What'd you say to me, Doug? I'm going to bring it every single day. Ryan?
So I was going to go with something, again, cliche, and say leaders eat last, because I just love the mentality of empowering our people to do cooler things. But I'm going to put that on the shelf, and I'm going to go outside the box, and I'll be the hacker of the group and say Cuckoo's Egg. For those that haven't read it, it's not exactly a strategic planning book, but it talks about an incident that happened back in the late 80s where a cybersecurity incident happened, and it highlights all the problems that we're still dealing with now, which is silos and compartmentalization and organizations not working together really driving the bad outcomes that we're trying to prevent from happening. If you haven't read it, go check it out. It really helps to highlight the theme of all the conversations we've had today, which is community. We all need to work together. We need to stop pointing and saying, that's not my responsibility, go talk to Joe. That's not my responsibility, go talk to JR. We all need to come together to solve all the problems that we're trying to do. And it's really talking about supporting, preventing existential level threats from happening. So no big pressure or anything.
No, but I appreciate the three of you, especially it's popularized and I think daring greatly by Brene Brown, but just being in the arena itself, right? Being the man in the arena or the woman in the arena and willing to go on the roadshow. I can imagine doing my own mini roadshow with the tech tables. It's a lot of work, right? So taking down the road and a lot of long hours, and the same thing that you've done, Doug, at Choice and JR throughout your career in the state of Arizona. So thank you for coming on the Public Sector Show by Tech Tables.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Joe Tossi from TechTables.com, and you're listening to the Public Sector Show by Tech Tables. This podcast features human-centric stories from public sector CIOs, CISOs, and technology leaders across federal, state, city, county, and higher education. You'll gain valuable insights into current issues and challenges faced by top leaders. Through interviews, speaking engagements, live podcast tour events, we offer you a behind-the-mic look at the opportunities top leaders are seeing today. And to make sure you never miss an episode, head over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and hit that follow button and leave a quick rating. Just tap the number of stars that you think this show deserves.